Welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the third in a series of relatively brief web events that we have assembled to introduce the policy briefs that you just heard about. This one will focus on jobs, and this, of course, is a very important issue around the world. We are in the midst of a pandemic that has had tremendous economic impact to virtually every country around the world, including, obviously, our member countries. And our countries are working hard to plan for how to pull out of the economic downturns that have resulted from this pandemic. And there's a great interest in taking advantage of the opportunity to make investments in needed infrastructure. We have watched with great interest as discussions around the world have progressed, and there is a real strong interest that we have seen for jobs to be created as quickly as possible. At the same time, we think it's very important that the investments that are made also help us over the long term. Obviously, it'd be very easy to have very simple jobs that are created in a very short period of time, but some of these jobs may not have the long-term impact that is possible. In the case of the nuclear industry, everything has long-term impact. Jobs that are created in the nuclear sector go on for many years during the construction of a nuclear power plant, usually 4, 5, 6 years of construction. And also, once a plant is operating, there are very high-paying, high-tech jobs that are available for 40, 50, 60, up to 80 years. And so this is something that we think is very important. There are many cases around the world where the construction of a nuclear power plant did not simply provide jobs, but also provided an engine for economic expansion in the regions of countries that did not have large tax bases or job opportunities. The opportunity before us is to develop a modern, resilient, zero-carbon infrastructure, and this might take some time. And that means that the investment in nuclear, while it will not give you all the returns and all the jobs in months, over the course of years, it gives you a very realistic approach to having a zero-carbon economy. This takes time, this takes analysis, but I think that once countries examine the possibilities resulting from nuclear construction, that they will be very interested in pursuing this option. Investing in nuclear energy is a proven way to create large numbers of long-term, high-skilled jobs that will pay premium wages, and nuclear projects provide high spillover investment and socioeconomic benefits to local economies. In examining this, one of our policy briefs has focused on the issue of job creation in the nuclear sector. We're going to talk about that today, and we have a distinguished panel to analyze the issues surrounding this. But to begin, I'm going to invite Salma Bilbao-Leon, who is the head of the Division of Nuclear Technology and Economics, to give us an overview of this policy brief. Salma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm going to do a very short summary of this policy brief that we have written on the impact that nuclear can have creating high-value jobs. And of course, as we have mentioned before, we developed these briefs with the help, with the support of our colleagues at the World Nuclear Association. So if we go to the next slide, I will try to put in perspective the importance of employment and in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis. Just last week, the OECD released their annual report, the Employment Outlook 2020, in which they highlighted the importance of this global pandemic to trigger one of the worst job crises since the Great Depression. So there is a very in-detail analysis of this crisis and what are the recommendations for countries to move forward and try to get out of the crisis. But not only that, the idea here is, in fact, to reconstruct a better and more resilient labor market as we move forward for this generation and also for future generations. I think it's important to highlight maybe 3 things that are mentioned in this report, because you will see that they are quite relevant to our brief. Number one is that both young people and women are among the groups of workers that are going to be most affected by this crisis. And of course, this is something that needs to be considered as we move forward and we try to create this job markets of the future. Second thing is we have seen how the governments have acted very quick and in an unprecedented manner, so that we have seen a relatively smaller impact of this COVID-19 crisis that maybe we would have seen without the fast and decisive action of many governments. So that has been quite important. But the third and just as important point is there is a need for continued support. So governments cannot stop this support immediately after there is a perception that the crisis is over. The support needs to continue, and furthermore, it needs to be done thoughtfully and looking at the long term, so that we can build a resilient labor market for the future. So you have also seen, and we have discussed this in our previous briefs, that the OECD governments and in general, most of the countries in the world, they really want to make this economic recovery to achieve several things at the same time. On the one hand, of course, we want to achieve long-term economic, social, and environmental objectives. Of course, we want to recover from the crisis, but we also want to do it in a way that we still achieve our ambition to get affordable energy transition plans. In other words, to achieve the decarbonization that most countries in the world have set up for themselves, following the objectives of the Paris Agreement and also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So in that sense, we feel that nuclear energy can help deliver not only socially equitable and affordable decarbonization, but it can also help preserve and develop quality employment. So if we go to the next slide, I think that it is important to notice that in this context, it is going to be important to invest in all kinds of sectors and activities that are going to really contribute to local, national, and regional economic growth and employment prospects. But we really need to make sure that these the activities and the sectors that we are investing in are also going to contribute to elevate the quality of life for society, and as I said before, to make sure that we result in a system that is equitable for everybody. So in this sense, nuclear energy projects can actually support employment and economic growth both in the shorter term and in the longer term. So let me very briefly elaborate. So when we look at the short term, we actually are looking at the long-term operation of existing nuclear power plants. So according to many studies, the long-term operation of the existing nuclear power plants is one of the most cost-effective low-carbon source of energy. And also, and just as important, it results in shovel-ready jobs. So essentially, these projects can start, many of them are ongoing and can provide employment immediately. But in addition, they can also preserve the current workforce and also the know-how that we have accumulated in the industry. So that is just as important. And finally, these long-term operation projects, they also result in technology and socio-economic spillovers in the overall local and national economies. So for example, and this is the picture that we have here, the refurbishment of the 6 reactors in Bruce Power in Canada will provide low-cost, reliable, carbon-free electricity until 2064. But, or in addition, it will sustain 22,000 jobs, which is quite remarkable. So let's go to the next slide when we look a little bit to the longer term. So historically, we have seen that the development of nuclear power has proven to be a catalyst for industrial and economic growth and prosperity across the world. We have many examples of countries with limited domestic resources, such as France, Japan, or Korea. in which they have taken advantage of developing a nuclear energy program for civilian purposes, and this has resulted in widespread growth along with energy independence and security of supply. And furthermore, this has also resulted in resiliency against any kind of geopolitical shocks. So today, if we are looking at new nuclear projects as a potential source of economic development and jobs, we have currently about more than 430 nuclear reactors that are proposed and planned in many countries around the world, and investing in the realization of these projects could truly play a crucial role in the post-pandemic economic recovery. So let me give you an example in the next slide, where we actually see the number of jobs, and this is only direct employment that can be created as a result of the construction of 1,000 megawatt electric nuclear power plant. And this is presented in labor years. So Mr. Magwood already alluded to this. So for the construction of a nuclear power plant, which could be anywhere from 6 to 10 years, we can see a large number of jobs at 1,200 employees. Then during the operation of the plant, which could be 40, 50, 60, in some countries we are going to operating lifetimes or around 80 years, we are going to have about 600 employees. And then if we close the life cycle of these facilities and we look at the long-term management of used nuclear fuel and waste management, and also the decommissioning of the plant, we also see additional jobs, not in the same order of magnitude as construction of operation, but clearly quite important jobs. But if we go to the next slide, we see that these jobs are important not only in quantity, which is clearly important, but just as importantly in quality. Nuclear energy projects are a proven way to create not only the large number of jobs that I just mentioned, but these jobs are going to be local, essentially, and this is something that distinguishes nuclear power projects from other energy projects. And it is the fact that we are going to have the majority of the jobs, or the impact of these jobs in the local economy is going to be quite significant. Just as importantly, these jobs are going to be long-term, they are going to be high-skilled, and they are going to pay premium wages. Some Oxford economics study for the Nuclear Energy Institute in the United States indicated that in average, jobs in the nuclear energy are about 20% better paid than jobs in the fossil fuel industry, and about 30% better paid than in the wind and solar generation. And this is quite important, not only because, as we see right now in the post-COVID crisis, there is going to be many high-tech industries that are going to be in turmoil. And because in the nuclear industry, we really need a lot of technical specialties, the nuclear industry offers a buffer in the short term for the LTO, and an opportunity for the long term to maintain investment in these skills that we already have in many sectors. And then the final thing that I think is just as important, and we will see this in the next slide, is that these nuclear energy projects, they actually have a huge potential for high spillover investment in the local and regional economy. And in here, I'm just going to close with a very poignant example I think that we are envisioning right now. And this is Hinkley Point Charlie, the project in the United Kingdom, that during construction is going to create over 25,000 employment opportunities. Of those, over 1,000 of them are going to be apprenticeships, which means that we are going to be creating opportunities for the young generation, as we said earlier, which is quite important. And it's going to spill over 1.5 billion of British pounds into the local economy. And then as we look forward to the long-term operation of this plant, we will create over 900 permanent jobs, and there will be a spillover in the local economy of over 40 million a year. And then this is very important, as I mentioned earlier. This is mostly local employment, local impact. Over 64% of these construction contracts are going to be delivered by UK companies. So let me close in the last slide by summarizing everything that I just said. As a policymaker, I think it's important to promote the investment in nuclear projects because we have proven how they can galvanize long-term sustained economic development. Also, for policymakers, it's important to consider not only the number of jobs, but their quality, the duration, and the location of these jobs. And finally, let me just reiterate what we have said before, that nuclear energy projects are a very proven way to create not only a large number of jobs, but these are going to be long-term, high-skilled, domestic, that pay premium wages and provide high spillover investment in the local and regional economy. So with this, Mr. Magwood, I close and I return the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the overview, and also appreciate the example of Hinkley Point C. I toured some of the training and economic development related activities related to Hinkley Point C. Is really very impressive. It actually reminds me a little bit of what happened during the space program of the 1960s, where you saw all these new opportunities for education and training, people getting jobs in high-tech areas, all from one central project. But it's not just the one project. It creates so many different companies and suppliers, and these are suppliers that will learn skills and create opportunities that will go far beyond the project itself. So it's really quite exciting. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a tremendous panel to talk about these issues today. We are looking forward to the comments from all of them, but we will start with Agneta Rising, who is our good friend and partner. As you heard, the World Nuclear Association contributed a great deal of information to the policy briefs that are now available. Agneta has been Director General of the World Nuclear Association since 2013, having previously held position of Vice President Environment at Vattenfall AB. In this post, she headed a pan-European department focused on energy, environment, and sustainability. And previously, she was Director for nuclear business development for Vattenfall Generation. She is also a co-founder and former president of Women in Nuclear. And Agneta, it's always a pleasure to have you. Please, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Magwood. Bill, it's really great to be here in this webinar with you. Thank you for inviting me. This is the second time we are talking on things we should do in the recovery after the COVID-19 and focusing now on jobs. And that's also why it's so great that we have today are publishing our new report specifically on jobs, and it is now today found on our website. So I will just go through a few items in addition to the excellent introduction that Sama did on your policy brief. And I hope you will stay here now and listen and not go looking to the report immediately. I also wanted to thank specifically for these webinars, these policy briefs, and also for the possibility to cooperate with NEA, because this is very important times when we see that everything around us is getting more and more challenging, more and more complex, and increasingly nearly every day. And that's why international organization has to take the leadership and to overcome some of the institutional barriers, to work together and make it possible to deliver some change and a stronger and better tomorrow. And from our perspective, the NEA policy briefs emphasize 4 crucial points. Firstly, that nuclear energy produces multiple benefits and offers a solution to some of the challenges created by the pandemic. Secondly, that nuclear power plants deliver value for money to energy consumers, whilst also helping to ensure that society decarbonize and on time and sustainably. And thirdly, that energy security is essential for dealing with an event such as a pandemic, nuclear energy serves as a pillar of stability during uncertain times. And fourthly, and most relevant to today's discussion, that investing in nuclear infrastructure is proven to create a large number of high value and highly skilled jobs. So next slide, please. As we see, and we have also learned about before in the last NEA webinar, nuclear brings important economic benefits, especially in the context of decarbonization. Nuclear new build is a highly cost-effective option in many key growth markets, such as China, as it's pictured here, as Asia and Africa generally. And with the publication of the new NEA report on how to reduce the costs of nuclear electricity, we know that nothing fundamentally is preventing Western nuclear countries from also achieving these low costs, especially if they commit to serious build and innovate on financing. However, it is a part of global efforts to address climate change that the real economic value of nuclear energy becomes undeniable. As countries ratchet down emissions limits, as they really would like to tip the curves, it becomes more and more costly to maintain a secure supply of energy. But by including some dispatchable low carbon electricity sources in the mix, these costs can be reduced greatly. As shown in the bottom figure, nuclear stands out in terms of its technical maturity, scalability, and potential for use in a range of non-power applications. So now on to a quick summary of the findings of this new World Nuclear Association report. And Sama made an excellent description of the policy paper and all the findings, and also about the facts already. So there is some few things only for me to add now. And you know that most of the employment estimates in the energy sector are just at a point in time. That is, they provide a snapshot rather than a view over the entire plant lifetime. But our report, however, uses existing studies to estimate employment in a steady state for both nuclear and wind energy. And here we are using the French nuclear sector and the US wind sector. They've been chosen because they partly have all the available employment data, and also because we assume, and it is assumed, that their supply chains are largely domestically located. And the schematic chart on the left, isn't that on the right, represents the overall employment contours for a 1 gigawatt nuclear facility and equivalent wind capacity over an 80-year period. The employment profile at the nuclear plant is much smoother and requiring, to the left it is of course, requiring a smaller peak of jobs during construction, but also employing more during operation. Jobs in nuclear operations especially tend to be long-term and will support workers who live in the communities near the plants. The chart on the right crunches the numbers from a range of public available reports to see how many people are employed, both directly in construction and also operation, but also indirectly through the wider supply chain to generate 1,000 terawatt hours per year within the two countries, the French and the US. This shows that the nuclear industry provides about 25% more employment per unit of electricity in France, more than the wind does in the US. We think this could be a general conclusion, that the nuclear industry employs more than the wind industry. But this is, of course, very much depending on the supply chain. If the supply chain is within the countries, or if you are importing everything. So it's not a large difference between these two low carbon energy sources when it only comes to looking at the number of the jobs over an 8-year period. Next slide, please. But not only does nuclear employ a little bit more people than wind, it will create more value in the wider economy. And how can this be true? And I think Sama told a lot about this already. But firstly, the average nuclear sector pay rate tends to exceed that of other energy technologies by a significant margin. The chart on the left provides pay trends for a range of US energy industries, which shows nuclear workers earning an additional $20,000 per year compared to workers in other energy industries. Paying workers more money means their families have higher disposable income to spend on goods and services throughout the community and more widely. Secondly, a fully fledged nuclear industry will generate value that is easily detectable at the macroeconomic level. The chart on the right shows how the European nuclear industry contributes to economic activity in the region worth €500 billion each year. In addition to the jobs and high household incomes, revenues generated through taxation reach the value of €124 billion, while the sector also generated a trade surplus of almost €20 billion. These figures are for a largely mature industry, where little new build is currently underway. However, we can readily imagine that just how much additional value would be created around the world if countries committed to accelerate the implementation of the 108 reactors which are already planned by governments, and ensuring the long-term operation of the 290 reactors which have been operational for over 30 years. These are shovel-ready projects, and we hopefully head into the COVID recovery phase. This is clear and urgent priority to make these investments. Next slide, please. In summary, our research shows that nuclear provides more employment per unit of electricity than wind power. These jobs will be generally better paid, better quality than those in other energy technologies. In fact, the nuclear industry acts as a jobs multiplier. Every direct job in the nuclear industry sustains 4 other jobs in the wider economy, from European report, and from an American report, the number 4 is also valid. But I can believe that in many countries that this number could even be 7. In some developing countries, I believe this value can be much larger, but already it's an impressive multiplier effect of 4. Even despite the employment benefit, nuclear maintains an economic advantage over intermittent renewables for final energy supply in a decarbonized mix, as it requires less spending on system costs. Nuclear energy as major infrastructure development attracts investment that drives sustained long-term local and national economic growth. And given all the above, we call on governments around the world to duly consider nuclear and its socio-economic, environmental, and public health benefits in an energy transition plan, and to enact policies that ensure the realization of the many benefits of nuclear energy. Thank you. I'm happy to get some questions.
Thank you very much. And there's several questions that have come in. But let me lead off with a general question, which is something we hear quite often, that nuclear jobs, if you were to start today with a clean piece of paper, it would take a long time before you would be ready to hire significant numbers of people for a nuclear project. How do you think that should be balanced? How would you talk to policymakers about the choice to be made about, let's say $1 billion of investment today? Should I go to preparing for a nuclear project, or should I go to, setting up some short-term construction activity, wind projects, or something like that?
So I would, of course, say we need to tick off many boxes. First of all, we need to keep the promises on the transition to low carbon electricity. Also, we need definitely to have a sustainable future. That means also the investments we should make now, we shall take the opportunity to in fact do it very resilient. And that's also where nuclear energy is one of the most resilient energy sources. And also it makes the whole electricity system very resilient. And these are important factors these days. to have this stable electricity. I think it's like a wake-up call for many governments that they definitely need to have some focus on the electricity system, which they have been able to avoid for a long, long time. And the whole crisis, and with less use of energy, we could see how important it is to have dispatchable energy. But I would say that those shovel-ready projects, as I mentioned, 108 projects, as soon as a government say, we are going to do nuclear, the investments come immediately because the supply chains get ready. I would say it's an immediate effect of a commitment by a government to put the nuclear in place. Those jobs are created immediately.
Thank you. Interesting. One question from the audience. It's already a trend to assess the nuclear power and nuclear power plant projects, macro effects, economic macro effects, in the terms of Sustainable Development Goal achievement. How might you approach a task to assess nuclear infrastructure investments to the SDGs? I thought that was an interesting question. Be interested in your response to that.
Mm-hmm. So I would sometimes say I've lived long enough to see how this development has already happened in several countries, and also to learn about the development in Korea, in Sweden, and in France, how this has driven the economy. And if you look to what you want to have in the Sustainable Development Goals, it's of course for also the developing countries to have the same modern society as we have. And those countries that use nuclear energy, they have access to all these important things in life. So I can say we can demonstrate that it's already been done in many countries, coming from very poor countries, and then reaching these levels. And the Sustainable Development Goals, nearly all, there is like a golden thread, and that is if you use nuclear energy, it helps on most of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you. Well, we have other questions, but I'm going to give the other panelists a chance to make their presentations, then we'll have a discussion at the end. So thank you very much, Agneta.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Robin Manley. He's Vice President of Nuclear Regulatory Affairs and Stakeholder Relations with Ontario Power Generation. OPG is the largest, most diverse nuclear operator in Canada, operating 10 CANDU nuclear reactors, as well as owning an additional 8 others, along with a diverse fleet of hydroelectric and gas generation units. Robin is a physicist. He holds a BS at Queen's in physics and a master's degree in astrophysics. So what is the astrophysicist perspective on all this? Robin, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Bill, and to the NEA and SAMA for putting on this opportunity. I found, Agneta, your remarks very interesting. I look forward to sharing them with our economic team here at Ontario Power Generation. Yeah, I'm Robin Manley. I'm actually, my new role is as the Vice President of New Nuclear Development at Ontario Power Generation in Canada. So I have the great opportunity to lead our program on small modular reactors and the potential for us to build new nuclear in Canada as the first mover here. I'm going to briefly provide you with an overview of our experience with the refurbishment of our Darlington nuclear generating station and the jobs and socioeconomic benefits that have brought as part of our long-term operation for that plant. And then I'm going to talk about some of the initiatives that we have been working on as helping Canada's post-COVID economic recovery relating to nuclear technology. And then I'll talk a little bit about small modular reactors and our plans there, because we're in the process of developing 2 SMR projects, one for an on-grid reactor and one for a microreactor. So first, a little bit about our midlife refurbishment of our Darlington station to enable its long-term operation. It's a 3,600 megawatt plant, so that's 4 900 megawatt CANDU reactors. And it's a 20-year project. So Agneta was talking about long-term jobs, and that's what you see when you enable long-term operation of a large station. 10 years of planning and about 10 years to execute this midlife refurbishment outage. Each unit outage will take about 3 years to do. And it's expected to cost a total of $12.8 billion Canadian and generate about 14,000 jobs. That's secondary jobs and tertiary jobs, as well as direct employment. Long term, this refurbishment is expected to boost the Ontario economy by about $90 billion Canadian. And in doing that work, we are replacing all the major reactor components, upgrading key plant systems, and making substantial safety and equipment investments in the plant. So it's a really major economic boost to the economy in Ontario in the long term for all the employment that it'll generate. Now, changing to topics a little bit, when the COVID crisis started, OPG, like all other companies, took stock of the work we were doing, including our projects and outages, and what we could do to help the public, local economy in Ontario. One thing we quickly identified, and I think nuclear is particularly good at this, we plan for things like pandemics. We are more ready, perhaps, than some others. And so we had a stockpile of protective equipment, such as masks, more than enough for ourselves, that we were able to supply to doctors and nurses in local hospitals, just generally helping the population as a whole. And of course, we did have to defer some of our project work when COVID struck, such as the second Darlington unit refurbishment that was about to start in early 2020. So we delayed that, and we're getting ready to restart it. From the beginning of the crisis, when so many businesses had to shut down, we've been evaluating the opportunities to help restart the Canadian economy. We developed a large list of initiatives that we could undertake over the next 12 to 18 months that could assist the Canadian government in its efforts to stimulate the economy. A wide range of projects and initiatives that we could bring forward, leveraging funding that might be available from the federal government, and then subsequent expenditures we would cover either through our own capital budget or electricity rates. And the potential arising from that could be the creation or sustainment of several thousand jobs. In addition, while doing that, we would be enabling the Canadian government's efforts to shift to a low carbon economy by investing in clean energy infrastructure. So some of the examples that we have come up with, including the restart of our Darlington Unit 3 refurbishment project, which we put on hold at the beginning, that would put back to work approximately 1,000 construction trades workers, supervisory and project management staff whose employment was paused when the project was put on hold. We also made available short-term bridge funding for critical nuclear suppliers to make sure that companies had enough cash flow to get through the crisis so that they would be able to survive through the issue, because you don't want them all going out of business and then you have no suppliers. That would be a bad situation. We also proposed a variety of near-term investment in small modular reactor research and development, potential advancing fuel qualification programs as being one of the critical path items, as well as advancing the first-of-a-kind deployment because of all the jobs that arise out of building new nuclear, such as Agnita identified earlier. We've also proposed some advancements in working on decommissioning techniques for the future can-do decommissioning of the fleet, as well as a variety, of course, of non-nuclear other clean energy projects, because OPG has a variety of other energy programs. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about small modular reactors. We have been advancing a project for a first-of-a-kind SMR in the range of 300 to 400 megawatts at our Darlington site, which we hope would then be duplicated at other locations elsewhere in Canada. Such a plant would replace coal plants and provide highly paid employment for about 200 people during the project development phase, about 1,000 construction workers during the construction period, and 100 to 200 staff during the 60-year plant operation. In addition, the Canadian nuclear supply chain would benefit in a transition from making parts for the refurbishment of the Bruce and Darlington CANDU reactors, which they're doing right now, but as that winds up, they would transition to production of components for small modular reactors in Canada and perhaps in other countries. And thus, we would sustain the nuclear supply chain in Canada overall, which makes up a total of about 76,000 jobs across the country. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say OPG, we believe, is already recognized for excellence in the safe and reliable operation of our nuclear facilities. And through the efforts that I've outlined above, we plan to continue attracting skilled jobs, innovative business, and economic development to the province of Ontario. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. Very, very interesting. And let me pick up on one of the last things you mentioned, which was the transition from the refurbishment to SMR related work. Since there's so many different SMR designs floating about, what were the essential skills from your suppliers that you were focusing on when you thought about this transition?
That's right. The excellent question. Sustaining the supply chain in the local economy, again, related to what Agneta was saying, is critical in our decision-making process. So one of the things that an organization in Canada called the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industry, OCNI, has done is they have invited a large range of SMR technology developer companies to have webinars and speak to the suppliers about what equipment they will be requiring, a little bit about their design. And they've been really building bridges across the Canadian nuclear industry to make sure that people know that they're out there. And what we will be doing is we will be seeking to maximize Canadian content in whichever technology developer we decide to go forward with. And obviously that requires those suppliers to be qualified, to have enough capacity to be on our supplier list and that sort of thing. Because much as we would be happy to work with anybody, it takes a long time to qualify a new supplier in the nuclear industry because of the pedigree that we require for our equipment.
And the 14,000 jobs you mentioned, what kind of jobs are these? Can you characterize what types of jobs we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not really totally expert on that, but clearly there's a large number of construction trades, whether it's boiler makers, electricians, civil works. We've been literally taking the reactor apart all the way down to the inside and then rebuilding it all. So one of the things that a CANDU reactor has is it has a large amount of pipe work, pressure tubes, calandria tubes, end fittings. So in the manufacturing sector, all of those tubes had to be skillfully crafted. Of course, you had to, just the fabrication of the metal, then all the forming, all the inspection, then the actual pipe work being rebuilt on site. And of course, all the supervisory staff, the programs, the engineering folks who are involved in quality inspectors. And of course, then there's all the secondary jobs that go along behind that. And so the entire economy of the local community is bolstered and is pulled up by the amount of employment that comes out of that. We have a map that shows the different suppliers and where they're located across Ontario, and they're literally spread throughout the province, with more than 90% of all of the employment and value happening in our province. So this was actually one of the factors that drove the decision. Is first off, you're supplying low cost, clean electricity for a very long period of time that's very reliable and safe, and you're employing a large number of people to do it, and you're paying them very well. And it actually made for a pretty compelling story.
And what was the local reaction to all this? Was it difficult to get the local communities supporting the project, or was there a lot of debate? Can you characterize how that unfolded?
Well, it's a long process of stakeholdering. So I certainly would not say it was easy, in the sense that a lot of people had to be brought along and you had to go through an environmental assessment. And you had to relicense the plant for this refurbishment, and all of those things require public hearings, and there are contrary voices, of course, and that sort of thing. But I think that the argument in the end of that the cost is going to be well justified, the value to the economy, the jobs that come out of it, and the fact that we have safely operated that plant since 1989, extremely reliably, to a very high WANO standard, world recognized. Eventually, these arguments were persuasive.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to try to keep us more or less on schedule, but don't go away. There's plenty of questions to follow up. But I will move on to the next speaker. Anton, I'm going to try real hard here to get this right. Deducinco, am I close? And he's Deputy CEO of Rosatom Energy International. He holds a PhD in International and European Law and Executive MBA. He worked in the UN family of organizations in Geneva, Switzerland, and in the Russian industrial and consulting companies. He joined Rosatom State Corporation in 2009 as first deputy head of the legal department of Report. In 2012, he moved to projects management and business development position at Rosatom Energy International. As a part of Rosatom State Nuclear Corporation, Rosatom Energy International manages 2 new nuclear build projects in Turkey and Finland. And since February 2018, Anton has served as the board of director deputy chair for the Turkish project. And since 2019, he's been a board member of the Finnish project. So with all that experience, Anton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magwood. Thanks all. Greetings from Moscow, Russia. Rosatom is definitely sharing the main motto of this session of creating high-value jobs in the post-COVID-19 era. Rosatom is celebrating 75 years anniversary this year, and we were creating jobs. We are creating jobs, and we will do it further on, and I will try to demonstrate it by way of examples of our 2 projects in Turkey and in Finland. Can I ask the next slide, please? So Rosatom is by far one of the biggest employer in Russia. We have more than 250,000 people aboard all over the world, and Rosatom is one of the most recognized employees and pays quite high salaries in Russia and all over the world. And these jobs are highly skilled and highly valued. We are present in more than 50 countries, and we are constructing 36 units abroad. It's a well-known information, but it's very important that to share the experience now. So I would like to focus on 2 projects of RAIN, Rosatom Energy International, which is a developer of the build, own, operate projects. It's a first of a kind story. So we are newcomers, and that's why all the figures are very important, that we are picking up them online, let's call it this way. So the project in Turkey, there are 4 units, almost 3 licenses for construction are granted, 2 are granted, 1 is pending. The project is under construction, and compared to Finnish project, which is currently in the licensing stage. Can we move to another slide, please? So some figures and some actions which are currently implemented and which lead to the high employment in both of these projects. So we are proud to announce that during the COVID times, we were able to keep the projects in schedule. So in Turkey, we currently have around 6,000 people working on the site, and we highly collaborated with the Turkish partners in implementation of the project in terms of employment as well. So we have the localization working group, which is established in between Rosatom and the Turkish body. And we have already now quite a few Turkish companies aboard the consortium of the project. So we have around 500 companies showing the interest in participating in the project, and one by one they are entering this consortium and joining the project. The important thing is that the project is based on Russian and Turkish standards, and we're collaborating with the Turkish Standardization Institute in order to implement the standards and pave the road for the Turkish companies to join the project, to be licensed and authorized to join the project. So currently we have around 80% of the staff on the site being the Turkish citizens, and we expect that the construction personnel will exceed 16,000 people with 11,000 qualified workers at peak construction time, and most of them will remain to be the Turkish citizens. In the operational stage, we expect at least 700 Turkish highly qualified experts to be involved. And in order to prepare them, we have launched, starting from 2011, the program of training of Turkish personnel and the key Russian institutions in collaboration with Turkish institutions. And already now we have graduates of 133 graduates who are they're joining the project company. They're trained, and we expect them to join the operational team once we launch the units. Not only the operational personnel is being trained, and we also launched several levels of educational programs on the college level as well, and we have even published some textbooks together with Turkish experts to interact with Turkish students and school children and so on and so forth. So all the levels of education are being covered. The training center is pending and will be built on site. So I'm just trying to show that all these measures create a strong collaborative effect, and we understand that we are for a long time in this country, and this project is pending, and we expect multiple effects to the economy, which I'll try to demonstrate further on. Of course, we have challenges, and these challenges are overcome with these measures. Another project is a Finnish project, which I also want to give you some background on. Compared to newcomer country of Turkey, Finland has a strong history of nuclear industry, and we definitely have differences here. On the other hand, this is also the Build on Operate project, where we are, as well as in Turkey, we are the biggest foreign direct investor into the economy of the country. And we have around 600 Finnish companies also registered for the project. We have a little bit different systems because in Finland it's market-driven story. So we have established companies who are able to register for the project participation. They show the interest, and by way of market-driven story, we have quite a big percentage of localization in this project. Currently, most of the companies on the site are Finnish companies, and we expect around 20,000 workers and specialists during the construction phase after we obtain the license, and we expect around 80% of the works to be provided by and completed by the Finnish contractors. We definitely in Rosatom have our own story, history, and the methods of calculation, the social economic effects, and we keep on the statistics, we keep on the lessons learned, and so on. So the statistics show that at least one job on the site encourages at least 5 to 6 jobs beyond the site construction and so on. So effects are different country by country, but in general, we definitely have it as a stable effect of construction of nuclear power plant. Next slide, please. Here you can see the general observation of Rosatom all over the world. From all over the world, what are the figures and what are the effects of building and developing the nuclear power plant projects. We show here all the stages, starting from development to decommissioning, and in general, in average, we have the effect on the economy throughout the lifetime of the nuclear power plant per unit of at least 60 billion US dollars. We have calculated, we have the methodology to calculate the effect for Finland, for example. So the effect, the methodology shows the effect of at least 110 billion effect on the economy from the investments and from the implementation of the project. And we believe that at least $1 invested creates around $1.9 effect in local industry in general, in average, 4.3 in GDP growth, and 1.4 in tax revenues. I believe that is all I wanted to share and say, and I'm definitely ready to answer any questions you have and elaborate into numbers and our experience. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That was extremely interesting, and we really appreciate the numbers you provided, because it makes it very tangible to see what the economic impacts are. Let me ask you one question, because you highlighted, and first let me say that I've always felt that one of the most impressive aspects of Rosatom's programs in other countries is the training and education effort. You know, to see hundreds and hundreds of Turkish students being trained in engineering and science is really quite impressive, and I think it's a huge contribution to that country's development as an industrial country. But one thing, and this sort of gets back to something that Robin Manley was talking about. Developing people is one thing, which I want to get back to in the panel discussion. But developing suppliers is a bit different. You know, suppliers have to have practice skills. They have to meet certification requirements. And you highlighted that a large number of Turkish companies, I think you said about 500 companies, were interested in being involved. What is the approach that you take to make sure that those companies are ready to supply the quality parts and services required for a nuclear project?
Thank you very much for this excellent question. The approach we are following now is a consortium, a collaboration with the Turkish suppliers. This is a mutual effect, because you know, it's a well-known fact that the Turkish companies are very good in construction and civil construction activities, and this experience is absolutely valuable for us. On the other hand, we do understand that only few of them were involved in nuclear projects before, though that's why we set up a collaborative approach, a joint venture. So, for example, in the Turkish project, we have a joint venture between our contractor, the Titan II, who is constructing and has recently was a physical startup of the Leningradskaya nuclear power plant. I think if you heard about it. So this is the contractor who has a joint venture with Turkish suppliers, and this is the main contractor in the project. So basically, the Turkish contractor is responsible for attracting and checking the supply chain, local supply chain, and implementing the standards and over the supply chain from top to bottom. And Titan II is involved in sharing experience and basically covering the areas where the Turkish contractor doesn't have experience yet. In Istanbul, especially in Istanbul, because we are located in different places in Turkey, so the main activities are on site in Mersin. We also have Ankara office in Istanbul. In Istanbul, there is an office for localization of this GV. where they're monitoring the whole market, and the suppliers are able to approach them and basically understand where they can feed the project. We definitely are focusing currently on suppliers depending on safety, basically for 1 to 3rd class is mostly being currently provided by the Russian suppliers, equipment and services, but little by little Turkish companies are learning, and this is a learning curve effect. So we believe that once we reach the 2nd unit, 3rd unit, 4th unit, the level of localization will be much higher, and the experience of the contractor will be definitely much higher.
Excellent. Thank you very much for explaining that. We had a couple other questions, but I think I need to move on to the other panels. But I will note that one question is from a young man who seems to be interested in working for Rosatom. He wants to know where your offices are located in the Middle East. So if you want to do a little job recruiting, I'll give you some time to do that at the end. Let's see. So last but certainly not least, Jay Shaw is a program director with Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Center. He joined AMRC's machining group in 2010, leading the group before moving to business development and then on to programs. He's responsible for ensuring that the center's projects deliver maximum value to the UK supply chain. Jay, the floor is yours.
Cheers. Thank you, Bill. And hello, everyone. Just to start with, I just want to give a quick overview of Nuclear MRC and what we do. So Nuclear MRC was set up in December 2009 to support the nuclear renaissance in the UK. We had several sites identified for nuclear new build. We also have around about 10 gigawatts of electricity in generating, strong decommissioning sector, and also a defence sector as well. So what do we do and how do we do it? So our mission is to help UK manufacturers win work in the nuclear sector, all subsectors of nuclear and other high-value manufacturing sectors, such as renewable, oil and gas, marine, aerospace, and chemicals. And we do this in 2 ways, manufacturing innovation and supply chain development. Merging the two creates capability, capacity, and competitiveness at a local, national, international level, and I'll touch on a little bit about how we do that. Manufacturing innovation focuses on improving cycle time, reducing lead time, cost, and risk. It could be argued that it focuses on using today's technology more smarter, or technology transfer from other sectors, or developing completely new technology and applying it into nuclear first and then rolling it out of nuclear. Roughly, we work on about 40% of today's technology, 40% is technology transfer, and 20% of what we do is new technology. Supply chain development focuses on raising quality, capability, helping companies grow their nuclear business, or bringing new companies into nuclear in the UK and increasing competitiveness by opening the pool up. So just coming back onto manufacturing innovation for a second, we've got 9 anchor technologies. They are machining, joining, so this is predominantly welding, additive and near net shape manufacturing, automation and digitization, control and instrumentation, analysis and simulation, product and process verification, equipment qualification, materials, corrosion and thermal engineering, and then last but not least, codes and standards and regulation. So giving a really quick, brief example how this works. So in the UK, we have our funding through a body called Innovate UK, and also industrial sponsorship as well. But we work internationally. And an example of this is we're working with EPRI in the US and Department of Energy on developing codes and standards for electron beam welding. Electron beam welding has been around for 20, 30, 40 years now, heavily used in aerospace, new to nuclear. So we're working with some of the supply chain in the US and in the UK to commercialize that process and create a code case for submission into ASME in the next 18 months. What that will mean then for not necessarily nuclear new build in the UK, but certainly the generating fleet, defence, Also, advanced modular reactors will be able to apply that technology and that technique. And an example of how this is applied on a reactor pressure vessel at 2/3 scale, we're able to take down one circ weld from roughly about 33 days down to about 4 hours. So it'd be game changing in terms of manufacturing time saved, but also in terms of that quality of that product as well. By doing a post-weld heat treat, you could, if the regulator agreed, as part of your safety case, you could take away the prolongation of that weld, so therefore reduce the outage time that would be needed on that particular part of the plant, should you desire to do that. The other area of the business that I talked about is supply chain development. We've worked with roughly around about 1,250 companies now in the UK through our Fit for Nuclear program. We've helped them win around about 1.25 billion pounds worth of contracts over the last 6.5 years. This program has been so successful, we've rolled it out now to other sectors. So we've got a Fit for Offshore Renewables currently underway. But we're also looking to advance and develop this program. The Fit for Nuclear program is really a business excellence program, so it's more focused on off-shop floor activity. So we've put basically a business case proposal into BEIS, Business Energy Industrial Strategy, here in the UK, which is part of the UK government. And we're expanding that program to be a £30 million 4-year program, that goes to the next level and is a lot more intense. So rather than focusing on the 1,250 companies, we look to focus on about 100 companies, get them more match fit, have a deeper dive, really understand the barriers to entry and growing their business, and help them commercialize some of that innovation, but also support them with today's technologies and today's challenges that are stopping those companies growing and being an international focused company as well. And we'll be delivering that with various different partners. To support our manufacturing innovation supply chain development, we do something called demand modeling. So demand modeling is where we take the short, medium, long-term technology drivers, but also industrial pulls. So looking at Hinkley Point C, Sizewell C could be the next or one of the next nuclear new build projects using the European pressurized water reactor. What will there be skills? What is the technology requirements needed to deliver that project safely and efficiently, and growing the UK's supply chains capacity and offers into EDF and the consortium partners there that are delivering that program. That's just one example. And we put that into a virtual reality model, look at the plant requirements, look at where the UK has got capacity, but maybe not necessarily capability, and work with them to plug that. An area of where we're doing this on advanced technologies is some people on this call may be aware of the UK SMR consortium, which is being led by Rolls-Royce. Nuclear MRC are a consortium member. What we're looking at there is we're looking at the development and the deployment of that reactor technology and applying advanced manufacturing techniques to de-risk the deployment of that technology, hopefully by 2030 or early 2030s. But it's then about rolling that capability now out into the supply chain so that they can deliver the impact. Nuclear MRC is not a commercial organisation in the fact that it delivers end-use product. It works with supply chains, both nationally and internationally, to deliver that end product. So we're working on 2/3 scale reactor pressure vessels, full-scale secondary circuit components and condensers, for example. And we are, again, looking at about a 50-50 split between today's technologies that are already proven from a manufacturing perspective and then developing new technologies. We also touch on other areas of clean energy. So a big driver at the minute, or a big discussion point at the minute in the UK, is about cogeneration and the hydrogen economy. So Nuclear MRC is the energy lead for the high value manufacturing catapult and for some areas of government. And we're looking at how nuclear new build could support cogeneration of both heat and hydrogen. So heat networks to supply that to commercial and residential properties, but also a byproduct then creating hydrogen so that we can put that into our gas networks and also fuel next generation energy sources. As part of our programme, under manufacturing innovation and supply chain development, we support skills development. We work very closely with the National Skills Academy for Nuclear and the National Skills Strategy Group, looking at both vocational training, so looking at welders, machinists, metrologists, but also looking at academic qualifications, so bachelor's and master's level qualifications, designing those programs and then implementing those programs through different bodies throughout the UK. We also have international collaborations in infancy, growing and fully developed. I talked a little bit about our strong relationship with the Department of Energy and EPRI in the US, but we also work closely with Canadian National Nuclear Labs. We work closely with CEA in France. We've done a little bit of work with Khalifa University and ENIC and FANA over in the UAE. We've done and we continue to explore and develop opportunities with KEPCO and Korea Hydronuclear Power over in South Korea. And CGN, China General Nuclear, are a developer in the UK, and we work closely with CGN both in the UK and in China. And the University of Sheffield, which I didn't mention, we are part of. They've got a collaboration agreement with Tsinghua University over in China as well on I-gas temperature reactors. So in summary, we are the gap between academia and industry, and we focus on commercialization of R&D or making today's technology work more smarter for that company. We de-risk the development and deployment of reactor technologies. We work with the supply chain to increase its capacity, capability and competitiveness from a national endeavour perspective, but also looking at growing our footprints in international markets as well. We work collaboratively with our international partners and national partners on funding high-risk, basically research and development for manufacturers, but also for reactor technologies as well. Thank you very much. Bill, I'll pass back to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation. And let me follow up on it. There were a couple of questions along the same lines. You mentioned that the AMRC is branching into non-nuclear areas, other areas of energy. And for example, is offshore wind one of the things that you're looking at? And if so, how are work in those types of areas complementary to what you're doing in nuclear? How do you see the two together?
So one of the big things that we drive for is technology transfer and learning and understanding from other sectors. So wind, offshore renewable energy, wind turbines is fastly growing in the UK. It equates to about 20-25% of the capacity on the grid here. We have one of the largest offshore wind farms anywhere in the world. And it's rare that a company is solely nuclear. They will have diverse sectors that they service. So what we're doing there is we're supporting UK manufacturers in the nuclear sector diversify to maintain capability and also to bring technology and techniques into the nuclear sector. So wind's a good example where there's quite a strong control and instrumentation body that's basically doing remote monitoring of bearings, motors, for example. They're also in the UK, they've brought in remote inspection techniques for basically unmanned vehicles, so autonomous flying vehicles. So we're looking at how those technologies and techniques have been deployed in the offshore renewable sector, bringing them back into nuclear applications to, say, remove somebody from a hot environment, but also supporting the supply chain, have a broad depth of different sectors that they're servicing to make them more robust and less reliant on nuclear in some ways, so that then it brings down their overhead cost. Therefore, it makes them more competitive.
And of course, in the nuclear sector, the quality control requirements are very high. Does that lead to any concerns from your side that if you have the same people working in different sectors, because the nuclear culture when it comes to manufacturing is very different from the culture in other fields. And of course, I think Agneta might point out that maybe it shouldn't always be, but
I mean, the nuclear sector across the globe is now going through a transition of trying to say that it's not special, it's not different. But I know from working in it, from a codes and standards and a regulation perspective, it is probably in the top one, as the saying goes. So one of the big things that we drive for here is we have a codes and standards group. We also have industrial advisors that focus on codes and standards and regulation. So as part of our supply chain program and manufacturing innovation, but it's more supply chain, we go out to manufacturers, making them aware of the codes and standards, the regulations, the quality requirements that are there, and then support them in maintaining that knowledge and application. So that when they get a nuclear contract along, they can adapt and deliver that to the right standard, the right code requirement, in line with the safety case, if it is a safety case component. And we also act as a body of knowledge. So we have a system which is called Ask Nuclear. So the supply chain can phone us up and say, I've got this particular tender inquiry, it's got these particular standards and requirements, and we'll then go in depth with that organization to, I would stop short of saying train them, but support them in delivering that component to ensure that they meet that requirement.
I appreciate that very much. Agneta, since I called you out, I'll give you a chance to talk about this a bit. I mean, there is this issue of whether the standards for nuclear should always be as aggressive as they are. There's been a big discussion in the industry in the last few years about that. And also, maybe you could also comment, because one thing that I think is very important is that that there's a lot of discussion in the industry as well about harmonizing standards internationally. I wonder if you maybe talk about that a little bit. You're muted. You're muted.
All right.
You're still muted.
I'm trying my best to unmute. Yes, of course, we need to drive down cost as well. And of course, harmonization is one of those, because, for instance, SMRs, we want them to be able to land in different countries. We would like them to fly around and land in different countries. That means they should be like also standardized. You shouldn't have to redo everything. But also components inside, to use the same codes is important, and to at least say this code and this code, they are relevant, both of them, they both do the same job. We can use those codes. There's lots of that work ongoing. So we have a large working group on this type of harmonization. But of course, a lot is also needed to be done by the regulators, because sometimes they add their own rules on top of. Now, when finally the industry have agreed on a rule, then the regulators, we anyway want our special treatment here to these components. So first of all, we need to keep a control of cost. That means that we shouldn't be having everything nuclear qualified. That means that every component is the most exclusive ones. That there is, for lots of components, you don't have to have the nuclear quality. And that's also where you can do lots of welding works in other parts of the nuclear plant, lots of jobs that are still high qualified, but not, you don't have the nuclear quality welding that you absolutely need inside. I think we can be more aware of where we need the nuclear quality and where not. We can be doing more harmonization and standardization in order to make our industry more competitive. Specifically, if we're going to have small modular reactors, we definitely have to go down that route. And also, every time we do tailor-made nuclear plants, it's also, we are learning every time, and of course that costs a little bit. If we cannot repeat a project and do the same, it will be quite expensive. So I think to find a good balance here and to work also with both regulators and the industry, it is important.
Thank you. Let me direct the question to Jay, Robin, and Anton, as people who are directly involved in some of these activities. How much, we're here to talk about the jobs and development that can arise from a nuclear project. How much, in your view, in the projects that you're familiar with, how much was that part of the policy making discussion in the UK, Canada, and Turkey and Finland? And Did you see that as a component of the way the decision was made, that policymakers understood there were jobs and development, or was that just a side benefit that wasn't a big factor in the decision? Maybe Anton, you can go first with your two projects.
Yes, thank you for the question. Definitely know that the projects are different, but the effects, as I've tried to show, are similar, and the decision making was absolutely different. So in Finland, it's purely commercial project, and in Turkey, it's based on the intergovernmental agreement of the newcomer country, of first NPP in the country. So in the intergovernmental agreement, there is no any target particular that certain amount shall be reached. However, there is definitely the principle that the Russian party will involve as much as possible of the create as much of as possible jobs and localize as much as possible. And this is not just the phrase in the intergovernmental agreement. It's really what is happening and what is absolutely necessary for development of the project, because this really creates the value. It's influenced on the budget. It's influenced on the schedule, and why would we bring the people and from Russia, and if we have very high level people in locally, right? So yes, it was definitely understood from the very beginning that we need to follow this track, but in Finland it happens naturally. So that's my answer.
All right. So more of a factor in Turkey than it was in Finland in terms of the development aspects. How about in Canada, Robin?
There's no question jobs will be a major factor if we are able to go forward with a new nuclear reactor project in Canada. There's just no way around it. If we can't show large amount of Canadian content, it won't be successful.
Okay, I like a clear answer. Jay, how about in the case of the UK?
So when Hinkley Point was basically brought about, the lead there was the contract for difference of £92.50 per megawatt hour from financing. But moving forward, it's very much like Canada. It'll be about long-term economic growth for the region and then nationally. So I can see that changing quite dramatically here in the UK.
Jay, when you were talking about your activities, it was you were very UK focused. You did mention a little bit of international at the end, but do you envision the UK suppliers being internationally competitive in the longer term future? Do you see them supplying to projects outside of the UK?
Yes, I mean that's the ambition. The idea is to grow capability or reignite the capability, because it's been a good 25 years in between projects, or a little bit over that now. Reignite that supply chain, make them nationally competitive, and then look to international markets to support and collaborate. The ambition then is to do that across nuclear new build and decommissioning through the work that goes off at Sellafield, and also decommissioning the AGR fleet here in the UK.
So the purpose of our policy brief was to highlight how nuclear construction can contribute to the post-COVID recovery. So what would you, and I'll start with you, Jay, and we'll kind of work the other direction. What would you say to policymakers in the UK if they were to ask you, hey, we've got a few $1 billion or pounds in your case to spend, and we want to create jobs. What do you think we should do? What would you tell them?
Well, to start with, I'd probably say just to hang fire with your money. If you could make some decisions a little bit quicker and support the industry a little bit more, and then bring the money out. The biggest thing I see here in the UK is around government making a decision and the timeliness of that decision. We look like we're starting to agree on a funding mechanism, what we can support nuclear new build. But ultimately, I think timeliness of decision making with that then finance. But as has been previously stated, in the UK, the nuclear sector has continued through the COVID-19 with minimal impact. It shows great skills and growth opportunity for employers and employees. And I think the government now recognise that. But ultimately, we need decisions, and we need them decisions in a timely manner. That's what I would suggest are the biggest things for the UK.
Okay, thank you. All right. How about in the case of Canada? If they had 10 billion Canadian dollars to put into something to create jobs, what would you tell them?
Well, that's a very large amount indeed. Might even be more than we need. I would say that electricity is a key component to long-term health of any community, any country, any economy. Nuclear power has been proven over many decades to provide reliable, safe electricity that overall raises the economy and the well-being of the population. What we've seen with carbon and greenhouse gas emissions and climate change is that we need more of that clean baseload electricity. And we've seen the economic studies that prove that nuclear will do that job very well. We've also seen the studies that show that with nuclear development, you get a large percentage of high quality, long-term jobs, which bring those secondary benefits in terms of pumping money back into the economy. So you really gain many benefits all at once by investing your dollar in growing nuclear development. Long-term, clean, reliable power, good jobs, boost the economy, sustainable electricity at low cost that helps all other sectors of the economy.
Anton, a comment?
First of all, I would thank our Turkish partners and say that they need to continue the policy they are currently doing and keep on constructing the nuclear power plants and support us the way they support us. In terms of Turkish project, in terms of Finnish project, as I said, projects are quite different, and it's a private nature one, but it's definitely also clear that the Finnish nation and government need this project. It's an absolutely valuable for us, and we feel it. We have we have 75 years anniversary in Rosatom, and we have 75% support of nation of the project. So in Finland. So this is kind of different stories, but comparable figures, and we feel that we are doing the right thing, and we feel support.
Well, thank you. I have two quick questions that were directed to you. First, has first concrete been poured at Unit 2 in Turkey?
Sorry, can you repeat kindly?
Yes. Have they poured first concrete in Unit 2?
Yes, it's true. Yes, we have poured, and I think the Turkish party has also announced it to the International Atomic Energy Agency, as far as I know. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. And also back to our job seeker, do you have any offices in the UAE?
Yes, I tried to. I don't know whether I was successful enough. I already answered through the system, and I even put the link towards the contacts of the office. Yes.
All right, you may be getting a resume. I'm afraid we're just about out of time, but Agneta, I'd like to give you the last word to wrap up if you have any observations.
Thank you very much. It has been very, very interesting, this whole webinar, very interesting. And when I would speak to a government, of course, I would say that you now have the opportunity to get high value jobs lasting for a very long time and address also climate change in the most cost effective way, as well as getting a resilient electricity system by investing your money in nuclear energy. And also you will get lots of happy people, because nuclear energy is really a nice place to work. And I think talking about jobs and hearing all these examples, also going back to UAE that we have heard about in a previous webinar, we see now they are getting more and more qualified supply chain, and they also now look to export. We talked about also UK, will that be the next step? And I see UAE already being a beginner, but also getting qualified supply chain. we can create jobs immediately. Lots of jobs are shovel ready. Sorry, lots of projects are shovel ready. That means I've been to countries where they have put everything in place, absolutely everything, except the government decision to go forward. If that is released and you have the framework, there will be lots of investments, also private ones.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much to the panel, and thanks to Sama and her team for putting all this together. Sama, did we miss anything? Do we have everything? All right, Sama looks happy. Okay.
No, I thought you were going to ask me to add anything, and I was going to say there's nothing I could possibly add because you have assembled a perfect panel that have made all the key points. So thank you everybody.
Excellent.
For, yeah.
Well, again, thanks to all of you. It's been a great discussion today, and we'll look forward to seeing the economic benefits from the projects you described. We're going to be watching this all very closely. So again, thank you very much.